Welcome back to the RaaP. Kyle, how you doing?
Good man. Coming back from all that turkey and some gravy as a service, so we're good.
Yeah, yeah. Here we are, right back, kind of firmly between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And for me, that means I'm oscillating between being like a total Grinch and actually really excited about Christmas. So, um, it feel like over time, I get I'm moving just a little bit more towards the Grinch on that spectrum. So I got to work on that, I think.
Yeah, yeah. You gotta get the heart two sizes too small to two sizes too large or whatever, right?
Yeah, yeah. I need it to grow 10 times today.
Yeah.
Um, but anyways, man, I think we've got a good kind of good segment planned here today. We're chatting ahead of time, kind of about what we plan to talk about today, and it's something we see a lot of. And really, what we're looking at is kind of what are the pitfalls, that we see time and time again, kind of during the sales process, right? Like, what are the gotchas? And so, obviously, we've done a lot of work here. We do a lot of training. Have built a lot of tools to prevent this. Have built things into our process to catch these sort of things. But I mean, you know, those came with lumps, right? I mean, we've been doing this for a while now, right? And so, especially in the early years, we learned a lot on this stuff and kind of some common pitfalls that we see during the IT sourcing process. So, really want to talk some about that today.
Yeah, yeah, and I think maybe an important context to set is that I don't think any of these are necessary, malicious on the part of the vendor or anything like that, which is why maybe that they sneak in there because I think we're people in general are looking for the used car salesman that's trying to get one over on you and purposefully be nefarious. But I don't know that that's what these are so much as like there just may be a gap between what's being said and what's being heard.
Yeah,
And so that's I think what we're talking about with some experience you can kind of navigate through those. And so if we want we jump right into the first one here. Is
yeah,
the
yeah. Let's do it.
Yeah, it's the call it the yes we can trap. Um,
Mm,
and what happens often is whether it's in a vendor demo day or while you're talking to a vendor about the product or service that you're potentially looking at is you ask a question like, hey, can you guys do X? Um, and almost always that vendor will reply yes for a handful of reasons, right? Salespeople tend to want to get to a yes, but they may be actually truly being truthful in that yes we can do that. The caveat that isn't said out loud is yes we can, but it's not in the tier of product or service that you're currently looking at or the one that we've currently quoted you, right? So you find out after the sale, after the implementation, and then you go to get that feature or thing, and it's not there, and it's like, oh well, that's an upcharge, right? But you're pot committed at that point, right? So now you end up in this kind of, well, the price that I thought I was getting isn't the price, and all those kinds of things, right? Has a second and third
yeah.
order effect.
Yeah, I think some of the things that can really help with this, first and foremost, just kind of free sharing of information, right? Like in both directions. From kind of the sales side, right? The vendor side, when you get asked one of those questions, you need to ask a follow up, like, hey, can you tell me a little bit more about what you're trying to achieve with that, right? And then that will typically prompt the buy side to explain, okay, well, I'm looking for this sort of integration, with this particular object, and here's the actual outcome that I want to produce from that. And you've got to get to that second level. I mean, the classic example of this are, any of the kind of voice vendors you see or contact center and Salesforce, right? You say, hey, do you integrate with Salesforce? Pretty much across the board, almost every vendor can say yes, right? Now there is a big difference between being like a native service cloud voice provider and somebody that yes, like we can do a click to call from a number inside of Salesforce. Right? Like, it's two just at massively different things,
Yeah.
right? Now both can say yes. Both are being totally truthful to answer that question. But without that second tier, like you're not going to get to first and foremost, like, is this vendor actually a fit for me? And then secondly, what you're talking about with, okay, they may be, but there's going to be financial implications to accomplish what I actually want to accomplish.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I think, so maybe some level of specificity in the questions, the piece you're talking about, the follow-up questions, really getting to the context of what is it that you're trying to achieve. Like all of those things can really help uncover what degree of yes this is, right? Because it's as much as we think of yes as binary, yes or no, in this context, like it's actually more of a spectrum of yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, some great questions here, right? Like, is that out of the box or is it custom, right? That kind of informs implementation cost, one-time cost, professional services, that sort of thing. And then the other is, how is this going to impact pricing, scope, timeline, right? Want to be asking those follow-up questions. So, I mean, this is the first one here, but I mean, this is one we see often, right? I mean, it is the work of our consultants to in these facilitated calls to hold the line on that and to be saying like, hey, like we're talking about this component right now. I need to make sure all parties are clear that this is included or not included and what the implications are of this.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's the first one, but like you said, I think why it's so big is it's prolific throughout the sales cycle. In that it's not just a one-time question and a one-time thing. Like you will run into this throughout all the different pieces of the way in which you ask and receive answers from vendors is really kind of the point. Kind of getting below the first answer. Especially when it's the answer you want to hear, right? Like I think that's the trick, right? It's like, oh, they said I wanted to hear, cool, let's move on. It's like, no, they said something I want to hear. Let me dig into that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. This next one is interesting because I mean, really it's part of the reason like our consultancy exists and others like us, right? We kind of refer to it as the hidden fee maze, right? But I mean, there is complexity in pricing for IT products, services, projects, right? There's a lot of complexity in it. And that is by design with a lot of vendors,
Yep.
right? I mean, this is a form of moat for vendors. Not only like is it harder to understand what you're looking at, it's harder to compare it to other things. And I mean, this is one that takes a lot of. I mean, it takes expertise to navigate.
It really does, and I think where we see it is in that comparison, because you're seeing one service that's live, and so all those things exist that don't always exist on the quote, or even if they are a line item on the quote, they're not showing whatever utilization rate that would actually show up on an invoice, right? So they may say like, yeah, you're going to get this kind of surcharge, or you're going to get this kind of fee, or this kind of fee per whatever, but that per whatever may not be, on the quote, the way it actually shows up on an invoice. So I think that's the piece is you dissect and really try to compare apples to apples, what you're looking for. Cause it's very easy, on a quote, you may not see taxes and these things are small, right? Like they're kind of like obvious, but also not necessarily when you are looking for this change. You're like, oh, look how cheaper this is. It's like, okay, well, your tax rate was 20+%. So if that's what you're looking at, it's like, oh, I'm saving 20%. And really, you just dropped one line item from what was your invoice to what is a quote. And those two things are not the same object.
Yeah, one of my favorite. I mean, this is just such a small little tactical step, but one of my favorite ways to do this and to kind of audit this is request a sample invoice. Right, like, hey, go to your system, produce a sample invoice. All right, and you'll see oftentimes there's some differences between what's on that quote and what's on a sample invoice. And this is, you want to make sure that what you're signing for is what you're going to be billed for, and that you have a solid understanding to build the business case. I mean, the other thing here is TCO modeling, right? Like really modeling that out, and considering, all the things that have been discussed during solution design and, that maybe you've looked at during demos, and like really understanding your requirements and mapping to it. Obviously all that's super important here as well.
Yeah. I love that idea, the getting a sample invoice, cause you actually get to see what those things look like for real. And again, I think it's like a somewhat simple, but also brilliant idea of how to get to clarity around, what that picture is going to be.
Yeah.
So the next one is the sales to delivery drop off, right? And so you go through this sales process. You've got what's perceived as the A team, hyper responsive, working with you. They have all this continuity that you've built around what you need in your business, the reason why you're there, what you're looking at. You sign that contract, and before that ink dries, they're gone, right? And it's a different team, so you get this kind of ninja vanish effect where that team drops off. There's a new team coming in, and they don't know who you are. They haven't had that context for the last however many weeks, months, or and that can be unnerving for a client, right? I think that sometimes vendors overlook what that experience feels like, where you've almost been in this state of being vulnerable about what I'm looking for and what my needs are and how I'm looking to, and somebody's been there talking to you about all the ways in which they're going to help you solve this, and you've built this trust, and then that person disappears, and the person that shows up goes, oh, what do you want to do? And that is very, very frightening around, like, wait a minute, like, we've had all this conversation, we've had this bridge of trust around, you knew what I wanted, and now you're gone. And so I think that's another one that you just kind of have to be either aware of, and prep for, or even ask the vendor how they bridge that gap so that team doesn't show up in that way.
Yeah. I like going a step further even, right? I mean, we would expect that a sales team talks to the delivery team. They're reviewing, the signed order, the SOW, whatever it is. They're sitting down and reviewing it. Likely there's some form of a PMO or like some form of oversight on the delivery team that's saying, like, great, we don't have any issues with this. We would like to believe that happens every time. My mom used to have some saying about something in one hand and wishing in the other and see which one fills up faster, right? What what I like to do here is actually make that handoff joint, right? So as the client, or in our role as client advocate, sit in on that handoff call. Actually see that handoff call from the sales team to the delivery team. Not only one are you just making it sure it happens, but then you're also there to witness it occurring, so that later delivery can't say, oh, we didn't know about that. Or if the sales team, if the vendor sales team is missing some of those details during the delivery, or maybe missing some of the context for why we're trying to do this and what's occurring, and the desired outcomes, you can fill those gaps for them. And that's really important. Like, really important. You should not just trust that there's going to be some really great handoff, right? I mean, it may be an SOW coming through Slack with a couple chats to the delivery team, right? That is not, for anything that's important on you, that you really want, you're accountable for the delivery of, you need to make sure that there's a handoff, and you should sit in on that.
100%. I mean, because even if we talked about, features 1 or the gotchas 1 and 2 feed into this gotcha 3, because those were the things you work through during the sales process of, can you do X and how do you do Y? And those don't necessarily always show up in a queue of an order, right? Where you're just getting a simple, hey, this is your next transaction. And they're looking at it in this kind of transactional project management fashion. And oftentimes, we've done that where that conversation is happening in the background first, between the vendor sales team, vendor delivery team, and us, so that when we show up and have that, conversation with the client, that the client isn't experiencing that, like, wait a minute, you guys don't know what's happening type of thing. That they
I tell you how many times delivery has said in those calls, oh, well, that's not included on this sort of thing. And then we look at, the vendor, and we're saying, it's included because we did these other things, right? We did these things. We discussed this, right? We've got it documented, right? And so it ends up being included. But I mean, that's not a rare occurrence.
No, and again, it goes back to client experience, right? Like, if that is your first experience of the moment after you signed a contract, of all the things you thought and had agreed on, and this new team showing up, and the first words out of their mouth are, all those things that you thought you trusted aren't true. it creates a horrible client experience. And so trying to like, hey, let's make sure you're spun up on all of these things. So you didn't just take a 5 minute or 30-second look at an order sheet and go, oh, this is the same as the last 1,000 that I've done.
Yeah.
No, let's actually make sure we understand the context and the nuance of this project to be effective.
Yeah.
So the next one, I think, is a little bit different than the hidden fee maze. And this one is the baseline quote. You want to give this one? You want to give this one a run?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of I think there's some systemic pieces here, right? Like, and you have to consider how you're engaging with vendors when you're asking for pricing, right? A lot of times, especially see this out of procurement shops sometimes, in areas, especially like in non-commoditized IT areas, where you're treating them like a commodity and you're saying like, hey, I want the pricing. Give me the pricing, right? Like, that's really a challenge in the more complex areas, right? Like, we obviously all want to get a look at the pricing early on, because in our heads, as we're making decisions about what to do with our business, right, we're trying to determine, hey, is this an area where there's going to be value? Like, is the price I'm going to pay going to result in an ROI that is acceptable, for me to continue investing time in this initiative or not? And without the pricing data, right, like without understanding roughly at least how much it's going to cost, it's very hard to decide that, right? Like, the without that, like, your time is just, you're spending in the dark, right? And so we all want to get to that quickly. I think you have to strike a balance here, because the problem is if you push the vendor to give it to you really quickly, but you haven't actually done a lot of the requirements. Again, this is a non-commoditized sort of stuff. You're going to get, what we call this baseline quote illusion, right? So they're going to throw something over. The vendor is incentivized, just systemically, to have that be a, reasonable cost, an entry point cost, a low level cost, right? They don't know the details of your requirements. You're pushing them for pricing like this. It's very clear that what they would do, again, like, I'm not saying there's ill intent involved. It's just systemically, right? Like,
Yeah.
What I think Charlie Munger, show me the incentives. I'll show you the outcome.
Yep.
Right? Like, it's very clear what they're going to do. They're going to throw across a baseline price. Now you're going to think, oh, this is wonderful. You're going to spend a lot more time investing into it, right? Next thing you know, you're 2-3 months down the line, and this thing has really ballooned up, and you had expectations of a certain price. They're much different now. Maybe you've already even committed to ensuring that something is done, right? And so now you're on a timeline. The base, this quote has ballooned, right? It's really not a good situation to be in, especially if you've been, as a business leader, informing, either your peers or the board or other executives, right? Like, this is not the situation you want to be in.
No, I was going to say there's the second and third order effect is reputational damage, right? Where you may be, because of that initial look, then you go back and you tell, the other executives or a board or whoever, this excitement around this project or this vendor, and then all of a sudden you get down the field a bit, and that balloon starts happening, and it's like, okay, well, now I'm back into this pot committed type situation. First, having a little bit of patience, because again, I think to your point, like, in that scenario, that stakeholder is forcing the situation that actually is what they feel like, oh, I just want to get to, get me that price, just show me the price. It's like, well, if I'm a vendor, I'm certainly not going to show you the most expensive version of what I have, because I'm not trying to scare you off, because that may not be like, in their defense, like, most of their clients probably aren't getting the, top tier of everything. And so where are they incentivized? Like, well, let me just show you what the base model is, because you haven't given me anything. So a little bit of patience and a little bit of preparation can go a long way in that process, right? Where let me provide at least some of those requirements so that that initial price gathering is at least in the ballpark of where we're going to end up, even if there are, again, I don't think you get to perfect on that first go, but it's not a massive delta that just like totally blows up the project.
Yeah, higher complexity, higher engagement, higher sharing, right? Like, that's generally a positive approach, right? And a little bit of patience on the pricing. Like spend the time up front to avoid a lot of pain later. This
Yeah.
last one, though, I'll take the last one. I mean, this one comes after all these other things, right? So, hey, we got through all of that. It was that happened. Now we got the renewal time bomb, right? It's coming back around. It's a year, 2 years, 3 years later, right? And you've got a renewal coming up. All right. This is a place where, I mean, man, we really see it now, right? I mean, you're seeing it with VMware, you're seeing it with Microsoft. Like these major publishers are really leaning into some of these tactics, and I mean, it's materially driving their bottom line. I mean, this is their strategy at this point, right? So I don't know. You want to take a run at explaining this one?
Um, sure. I mean, I think that you can look at it from different points in time chronologically, even, you know, okay, renewal's coming up, what do you do? But also, as as we're talking about going into a contract, just actually understanding what the terms are around that renewal,
Mm-hmm.
and being careful, as I think both of us have used the saying, future Kyle problems.
Yeah.
The problem with future Kyle is he becomes present Kyle, and he's really mad at past Kyle. Uh, right? So uh, those are things that, like, yes, like there is a strategy there that says, hey, I'm gonna do this 1 year or whatever to get through this initial phase, and then we'll do some level of cleanup because we'll know more about what it is we need, what we don't need, our utilization, our seat numbers, and then we'll do a cleanup. And I think that that can work, but you have to have a ton of discipline in actually doing it on the back end and not just continuing to punt down the field, right? And some of that look in the mirror is, well, if I don't have the discipline to do it now, what's different post contract in the next renewal that is going to, all of a sudden, I'm going to have discipline to go through those steps and do it then. And
Yeah.
again, like, there is a strategy there. There are some times where that works and it makes sense. Um, I would just be very careful, and like, that's a, if I really really need to use that strategy versus like it's the easy button, because that easy button becomes painful later.
Yeah, I mean, you really need to be thinking about the renewal at the initial contract, right? You've got to be thinking about notice periods. You've got to be thinking about true up, true down, that sort of stuff, and making sure that it aligns with what you're actually able to do on that technology as well, right? Like it, a lower number isn't always necessarily better. Like a lower number, on a really entangled or enmeshed technology doesn't matter, right? You're going to have to do things technically to change it or refactor or migrate or do this sort of stuff, right? And so, like, lining up basically, your IT team's capacity, capability, abilities to actually make changes and make effect with the contract terms, and engaging in that vendor to ensure you're not so far, because they will let you get right up to the line where you can't do anything.
Yep.
I mean, this right now, there's a ton of this happening with VMware, right? Like people, some people are very frustrated with VMware and their negotiation tactics, and they're saying, "I'm so frustrated, I want to leave. I want to go to Nutanix, want to go to Azure Stack, want to do something else," right? Um, but that takes that's a process, depending on your team's capabilities,
Yeah.
or the partners that you have. That's not okay. My renewal is 30 days from now. I'm going to do this instead. Like you're you're stuck. They know you're stuck. That's why they did the strategy. That's why they're throwing these renewals out there that are so much more expensive. They have you captive unless you do something to affect it,
Yeah.
right? And so it's not as simple. A lot of these IT things, these renewals are not as simple as a commoditized sort of procurement initiative, right? Because if you actually want any leverage, you actually want any ability to do something, you know, you're going to have to involve your team, or a partner to do it. But
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you probably want to look at that from a couple different lenses. Call it the remodel lens, which is I'm plan to stay with this vendor, but I may need to right size or reshape what it is that I'm getting, and understanding what is or isn't allowed, or how easy it is to flex within the space, right? Like, can I just drop seats, or do I have some type of special pricing because of my threat? Like, all those things, right? Like, what's the flexibility inside of the environment? And then the second part is obviously, okay, I don't want to use this vendor anymore, this solution. How hard is it going to be for me to move? And what does that mean from a renewal period? If I want to make, what's my go, no go line, right? Like, I can't wait up until 20 days prior to a renewal and think I'm going to lift an entire infrastructure environment, right? Like, that's like a year plus planning. And if where does my renewal line up on that, so that when is the decision actually need to get made to then be in a position to affect that change, accordingly.
yeah, well, that's 5. These are things that we've seen a lot of over the years. We've built our processes around this, right? We've trained our team on seeing it. So I mean, we know how to counter these, but they're things we see all the time. And so know that when people are out there, not working with somebody who's experienced in this space, who has done this stuff, you're really at a disadvantage in these sort of things, right? Because I mean, the other side of that table, right, the vendor side, they're doing these conversations all day, every day, right? And so, I don't know, use a partner. Um, that's. I guess I'll leave it there, and that's a wrap. Oh no, you got more.
We're
Go
gonna
ahead.
unwrap before you wrap.
Okay, yeah, pull it down.
I want to double tap that. Like, I think there's this experience from the vendor side, right? I'm an IT director, I'm a CIO, I'm a CTO. I've been doing this for 20 years. I've done plenty of contract negotiations. But as you kind of alluded to, that salesperson has probably been in more sales conversations with CTO in the last year than some of those people have been in 5 years. I mean, that's all they do, right? Like, a CTO has a much bigger job. A CIO has a much bigger job. And so, like, I wouldn't get into that false sense of confidence of, oh, I know what I've got this, when the person at the other end of the table has had these conversations all day, every day.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. 100%. I mean, use a partner. If you're not use a partner, kind of crazy.
Yeah.
I'm biased, but I think it's well founded in this instance. So, and that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.